This is a video on how to drone for the people who really struggle to do it and cannot. It's going to go to Ash because it's faster. Not faster movement wise, but doesn't really matter. Right. Key principles.
Use your drone to locate a bomb.
Key principles. If you're an entry fragger, your drone should be on a flank watch position because you are most likely to die on the team at the start of the round. Accidents happen, stuff happens, you're likely to die. So as an entry fragger, your drone should be in a spot where it's really not going to get shot, but it actually sees something. If your drone is in some pointless spot, you're not helping your team. Even something as simple as throwing your drone on something like here, where it's unlikely to get shot, but you've got sound cues, could help your team later in the round.
10 seconds to go.
Hear someone running if they're top floor. You might hear a rotation from meeting if you're attacking downstairs. So that's an example of what to do if you're entry flagging. There are great examples on board of places you can put your drones for flanks, which we could, I guess, leave this lobby and then do it on board as well. I'll show an example of that. So, in the prep phase, any drone lost in the prep phase is a loss to the team, especially if your drone is Thermite or Thatcher or any supporting op that is droning, because if you are droning your teammates in, especially Thermite and Thatcher's drones, like ops that need to be alive for utility, you should not be losing your drone in prep phase no matter what, because if the argument, I'll just immediately prove an argument saying that you need to know what ops they have. The majority of the time in high-level play, the ops are the same. The ops are the meta, and also there's only so much utility difference that the roamers can have in terms of, say, legion mines or ele mines, of which you will know once you drone them out anyway. So you don't need any prior information before going for the roamers, and when you're going for the site take, you should be droning the site anyway, so you'll know if there are frost mats, capgun traps, etc. So you don't need to do that. I don't know, I've spent a lot of time talking about that, but that's just like a principle. You don't need to know who the enemy team is ringing. So this is an example of a drone you should do as the primary droner for your team. So this drone immediately cuts off the rotation to showers, dining, and I can see the door of kitchen. I can't see it white stairs, so I could move it. But I don't want the drone to get shot, so that's the difficulty you have as the entry droner. You don't want the drone to get shot, so you're putting it in a position where you're covering a certain part of the map where your team is entering from. So on Oregon, it's common for you to do a west side take, where you go through showers and dining and you clear upstairs, because it's easy to cut off rotations for the defenders who are playing up there, and they've only got two ways to come back. So that's an example of, this map is much simpler to roam clear than other maps, but this is an example of where you put your drone at the start, but we're going to have to go to another round just to show you what I would do if I was droning somebody in.
You're out of time.
So obviously droning someone else in it only really applies if you're in a more coordinated team. On PC you all have mics, so it's easier. On console, ideally there's 3 or 4 of you to be able to do this. But let's just go for an example if you are if you are to drone somebody in from that direction. So the issues you're going to run into when you're doing something like this is the pacing of the players you're droning in. If they are really slow players, it's going to make this even harder and even slower, and really the whole point of this is to speed it up. So let's say that, for example, they're downstairs and I have the same kind of drone as I did before. Now I'm not going to call that any of these things are clear in the moment, because there's still 20 seconds of the round. Someone can go for a spawn peek in showers, or someone can go to dining. So this is like a safer drone that I'm doing. So I'm picking a safe spawn, so I'm not going to spawn construction because you can get run out from. So I might spawn street, say if I'm the hard breacher, because we might have to go for the hatch. So I want to do that later in the round, so I'm not going to spawn too far from there. So I've noticed that no one's crossed the showers dining, so I'm immediately going to get on the drone. Right, and I see nobody cross here. Now, there's a very small 1-second window where someone could cross, but it's highly unlikely that's going to happen to you. So I'm immediately going to call small tower, showers, and dining clear. Immediately. That tells the person who is coming from junkyard spawn that they can immediately get into small tower and immediately get into dining if they wanted to. Now, the importance of that is that you're speeding things up as quickly as possible, and you want the person who is entering to get into one of those places as early in the round as they can. they pretty much want to sprint straight off spawn, because you've told them that there's no spawn peaks. If you're coordinated, then this is even easier. So once they're now, there's two ways you can do this, depending on how good your teammate is. If he's not very good, then you may want to keep your drone sort of like this, so you're telling, you know, you're giving information if someone's coming kitchen or this. And as soon as he's in dining, then you can start droning. But ideally, if you have two people entering, the duo entering, they should get the trade anyway. So if someone's going shower, someone's going dining, what I will then do, if I know they're pushing that, is I will just throw my drone up and immediately start droning. So you want to be droning the harder to check places. So I've immediately checked our bathroom's clear, and then notice I'm rechecking kitchen because there are rotates that can be made and holes can be above. So I'm rechecking this. Now I don't want to double back to dining because that's already cleared. My teammates should be in there at this point in the round. So now I've gone to this point. We know that bathroom and kitchen are clear. So the teammate should ideally be getting control over your kitchen. Now you should have, depending on what you're doing, so then you could have someone on this big window. But anyway, so your next bit as the droner will be to droning like kids, and basically you're just clearing this side of the map for your team.
10 seconds left.
Now
5
you
seconds
don't
left.
have to drone them. You don't have to drone every single part of the map. So I'll go through it more, like when we go for this. So you drone out small doms and you drone out armory, and then you can leave your drone in a good flank watch position. So on top of armory stairs is a decent position if they haven't reinforced the meeting wall. It means that if someone were to go for an impact, you'd be able to see on the drone if someone dies and they're on flank watch later in the round. So now we'll go over something else.
We need to locate a
That's
bomb.
like an example of how to drone from that way. And okay, so another example is if you're the droner and I say I need to get my drone to T2, which is the second floor of the tower, you shouldn't be going through the middle of the map. You shouldn't even be going through garage. If you're actively trying to save your drone, you have more than enough time to go around the map on most of the maps in the game. I'm not saying I'll do it on bank, but especially on maps like Border and this map, which is much smaller, you could easily get your drone here. So again, the same principle applies. The reason why you have your drone sort of like this, or at least like this, is just so you can see if anyone's impacting into T2 from the addict side. And then it's a similar story. You get on your drone straight away. If it's a spawn where you need to move, like doing this is totally fine off the start, just because then you're not getting, no one can run out and then kill you. So you're immediately calling that Tower 2 is clear. And so this is an example of where sometimes you may want to hold your drone here just while your teammate gets on the rappel, and then once he's inside the tower, then you can start droning something else. But especially on floors where there's something below them, it can be helpful to quickly drone below, even if, say, they're downstairs. We're not droning all the way downstairs, we're just checking the stairs quickly. And then you're immediately checking like their next place where someone could be coming from. So immediately checking meeting. And like when you're droning, you want to like keep your drone like under stuff, so it's not easy to, it's harder to shoot. And then also you want to be also checking like corners. So when you're droning and jumping around, you want to basically like scan around so you can see quickly. Another thing to note is that when you're droning, this is quite slower compared to jumping. So most people will jump constantly with the drone, but if you are droning a roamer and you know they're there, and say they don't know that you know they're there, and your teammates are pushing on them, it can be helpful to not jump because it makes it louder. So if you know someone was in armory, and you want to make sure that someone's going to go on the armory rappel, and you're just going to hold them there, you can slowly push your drone up, sort of like this, and just basically tell your teammates if they're leaving the position. So that's an example of when you find a roamer, say someone's in kids, they have no rotate, you can soft hold your drone like this, so it's like a spot where you can see them leave the room, but then if they were to leave the room and they're trying to shoot your drone, you've got a place to move your drone away. So you're saving your drone, but then you're telling your team where they are, basically.
Time expired.
So we will now go. Those are like the very basic principles. You need to basically apply that to other maps. So ideally, it should be more than one person droning, and there should be someone holding like the rotate. So example on this map is someone should always be spraying the main door of White Van. So if there's anyone upstairs, the only rotate down is through rotations to attic or rotations from kitchen to meeting, and they have to be already made. So in a lot of cases, those holes are not made because some people see it as a downside. So you'll be able to easily cut off the rotation, and then if that room doesn't have impacts, they're a free kill. I don't think we won't make this any longer than it really needs to be. There's nothing too complicated, but we will just go over something, for example, like when you're going for the execute on site. A lot of people, especially entry fraggers, really underestimate how strong drones are before going for the execute. If you watch any pro games, even when there's 30 seconds left on the rounds and they have to plant the diffuser in a 2 versus 3, they will drone the defending team, especially if they have no prior information. So for example, if you don't have the hatch open, then you know that someone could be sat in a lot of positions downstairs, so just droning it out quickly would give you a lot of help. Now an example is there'll be a mirror on this front wall and it's going to try and shoot your drones. So even if you just put your drone like in a position where the mirror can't shoot it, say like this, then this allows your teammates who are helping you clutch just watch something. So even if your drone is something which you don't think is going to be useful, so something like this where it only watches connector can win you the round based on the fact that you can say you're planning and your teammate is trying to hold hallway or hold the mirror, then you don't have to watch connector because you have a drone on it already. So it allows the people who are dead to make calls, and then it cuts off one less angle, which is why it's so strong to drone. Especially when you're going for the plant. Especially if you have a minute left, you should be droning the site no matter what. You should be droning the entry to the site no matter what, because there's always somebody sat in a weird position with a shotgun, and etc, like C4 traps. And it just helps you go for the execute, because I think a lot of the times you'll see it in lower tier play. You don't see it in really pro play, but they'll go for executes too early when you don't have enough information. And you want to know like how many canisters does smoke have? Do they have C4s? Are there Valkyrie cams? Are there Maestro cams? Do we have an Ash charge? Stuff like that. I know it's kind of obvious to some of you, but the whole point is like when you're going for the execute, you should be droning. Even if you got 20, I got 20 seconds left. I gotta plant the diffuser. Let's just say, for example, like the hatch was open. That's charged, but even if you do something as simple as do this and then plant, like for example, like the drone I've thrown, it's still gonna see something, so it's gonna give me information. But that's pretty much it for this video on droning. I don't want to make it too longer than this. It's not a hard skill at all. I wouldn't even class it as a skill. It's just that people just do it wrong, and you're supposed, if you're the droner, I think another issue you have that I can talk about is like Habana. You must get the hatches open. You must do this. You have to Thatcher this, and it's just not the right mentality when you're going about things. Like for example, before this map was really developed, and Clubhouse is a great example of this. Like when you're attacking downstairs, you could just Habana that on thermite the hatch, no problem at all. Like no congestion. Now there's always a pulse. There's Cades now in the game. They have impact tricking, holes above, and with this hatch, people are more aware of this now. But previously, like people just really weren't paying attention to this at all. So especially with Kaid in the game, it's really important that even before. So this is why you should be droning as a hard breacher anyway. Before you even go for anything, you should be droning, behind the breach to make sure there's no Kaid just sat there waiting to throw a charge on it. And that's a great example of when you're going for hard walls too. Is a lot of the time Thatcher will just throw his EMP and he'll be like, yeah, just put your charge down. When there's a bandit right next to the wall tricking, you should always be droning. But yeah, I will just end this lobby and I will go to border, just as an example of where to put flank drones and ways that they can be useful to the team. There's a lot of them that you've probably already seen, but you can, if you already have got the idea of how to drone from this video and you don't want to see these flank drones, you probably already see them. Just skip the video, just end it. But if you do want to see them, like examples of what I'm talking about, where if you are the entry fragger, so if you're Ash, Sophia, Book, some character where you're pushing in first, because you know, if you die to a team, it's not as drastic compared to like Thermite or like Thatcher. If they're, you know, certain ops that you need, like Capital, Ying, that you need alive for the execute. So that's basically how you decide how who is entering for the team, right? Because a Maestro Cam is hard to deal with if you don't have an Ash charge, but a character like Capital or Ying is much stronger on Glass, much stronger for the execute compared to like something like an Ash or even a Buck, because the majority of the time with those two characters you're going to use your utility at the start on it anyway. So, and every character has a gun, so they can all make the same holes you make. In a sense, like if you hard reachers can do exactly what Ash did, just not as safe distance. And and if you need to get bandits off with Buck or something like that, then you can just make them. So this is just an I'm just gonna go through quickly a couple of examples of like flank drones that you should be doing if you're the entry fragger. So the reason why, as an entry fragger, you want your drone to be on the flank and not where you're entering from. Oh, this is actually a good point, actually. So on board, for example, you know there's a pulse, you want to kill him, but as Ash, you don't want to get your droning workshop to try and kill him because you're not going to be droning the pulse. Someone's going to be droning you in instead. So if you die and your drone is in a stupid spot, say it's in spawn, or it's in workshop, and you're already going to kill the pulse anyway because you're going to trade him, then once you've killed him, you've got a pointless drone that's in workshop, and you've lost your second drone because you're entering. And so another example when you're entering too is, say I'm entering CCTV and I've got my flank drone here. You can quickly check this, and then even when you're going for if you're going to enter it, you can just throw up another drone, just like inside that watches the same thing before you enter, just so that you've got your drone down. I don't know, you don't really have to, but it's just like an example of it. So if you're trying to kill someone downstairs, it's the pulse, and your drone is down. Like I said before, if your drone's downstairs, you're just wasting your drone, because if you die, that's not really helping your team. Whereas if you're the Thermite and you know someone's downstairs and you're droning the Ash in, then Ash can move, you don't have to be on a drone, and you can directly call for the Ash, and that's just so much better. There are like a couple of exceptions where, like, if say I'm Thermite now and my drone gets shot, but Ash is pushing from main door, and I know the guy is in server, I know his rotate is through here, you might want to get on these windows and cut off the rotate. So those are examples where, say if I have a second drone as Thermite, but the entry fragger is so close to the roamer that I won't be able to drone in time, then at that point you want to be holding like a rotation if you can. That's just much better for your team, because the majority of the time is, like, by the time you've thrown the drone down there, the gunfight's going to go one way, right? So you got to read the situation, and ideally it shouldn't just be you droning. There are times as the entry fragger where you should be droning you should get one kill and then fall back and then drone again. But yeah, that's pretty much it. You just have to play. Like, if you follow the principles I talked about at the start in Oregon, you shouldn't have too much of a problem, but it's just more of like getting that idea down in your head that if you're entry, drone on flank. If you're like support player, you should be droning the people who are entering in. You should be droning where they're entering the building from, and you should be communicating this at the start of the round so that it's as quick as possible. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll see you in the next one. This is for all the plebs who don't know how to drone.